I think I spend way too much time on AliExpress because I keep finding amazing watches and I keep adding those amazing watches to my wish list. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. And today we're doing another AliExpress wish list videos. These are watches that I've found on AliExpress that I am actually considering purchasing because I think they look really cool, really amazing, and really good value. But none of them have ended up in my hands yet, so I can't actually recommend them to you. I just want to bring your attention to them because they've stood out to me. And if they've stood out to me enough to me to consider buying them, or perhaps you might be interested in them too. And of course, because of that, I'm going to leave some affiliate links in the description of this video. That means you can click on them and go straight to the store that I'm considering purchasing them from. And if you do, this channel earns a tiny little bit of commission. So thank you if you choose to do that. But now I want to show you these watches because there's a couple that really stand out to me, and there's a couple that I'm seriously considering buying. I'm going to be sharing 10 watches that are on my wish list today, and just to make it a little bit easy on everybody, I'm going to have it set to US dollars, just so I don't need to do those conversions for every single watch, because that does take a fair bit of time, and perhaps because it is a slightly more international currency, it might be a little bit easier for you to do that translation for yourself. But let's jump into the first watch, which I really am excited to share with you. So this is the Proxima PX1715, a 39mm, very much a sort of vintage style watch, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. And I've heard some great things about Proxima. I think they're meant to be a really good brand, really good quality, listed at $199.99. And of course, there might be some vouchers and on discount when you're looking at the sales there, so keep that in mind. A 39mm case diameter, which is perfect. I love that. 12.4mm. It does have a seagull hand winding movement, which I don't mind too much, especially in this sort of price range. 20mm bandwidth, 50 meters of water resistance. I just think it's very cool. I like this style of watch. I think it's I don't know, there's something about it that really captures my attention, and having that sort of chronograph in the back as well does look very, very, very cool. I just like it. You know, I've got a Tissot that has a little bit of a similar sort of dial style to this. I've got a vintage watch that has a very similar dial style to this. So it really does capture my attention, and I think at this price, this might be a really good option to have something slightly vintage inspired, but also something relatively sort of affordable. The next one I want to jump into is actually a slightly expensive Pagani design. It's the most expensive Pagani design I've probably seen, probably because it is an NH34 GMT version of it. $199.99 again, but for a Pagani design, that's probably a little bit more expensive. This is the PD1784, and you can see this is a pretty much an obvious homage of a Longines as far as I can see, but much cheaper than a Longines. 1784, the PD, 14mm thick, 40mm case diameter, and the Seiko NH34, which is the big positive. And now recently I have had some hands-on experience with some of the new Pagani design watches, and I've been so impressed by the extra level of quality that they've seemed to have been achieving. So even though they still are generally still pretty affordable, this one may be a little bit more expensive obviously, but the overall quality of them is significantly better. So I think it may be justifying this extra price. Next, I'm heading to a Roland. I'm a big fan of the Roland brand. I've had a couple from them and they're absolutely fantastic. This one is obviously sort of a vintagey style, sort of a diver. Let's have a look at some photos of it. Oh yeah, on the leather, that looks absolutely awesome. I think this is a NH35 powered watch, 145 US dollars. I think there's a couple of different variations in colors. There's a brown one, there's a black one with or without logo as well. And as we scroll down to some of the specifications of this one, let's check it out. It is a 41.8. So for a dive style, that sort of case diameter is pretty good. Yeah, Seiko powered, which I like to see. 200 meters of water resistance, and it's the F025. Just want to go back to one of those pictures of it because I'm really sort of enjoying this style of watch at the moment. I've recently bought a Christopher Ward, which I think has a little bit of a similar sort of style to it with the hands and this kind of sort of vintagey sort of maybe dive sort of vintage look or skin diver sort of look. I just think it's a great look, and a few brands are having this kind of look of watch like that Christopher Ward that I've recently bought. But to be able to get one from AliExpress at this price, and I know that Roland is really good quality because, well, I'm wearing a Roland right now. I really enjoy the brand. I think this one might be worthwhile checking out. The next watch is from Mercure, and I've had a couple of watches from them, and I've been impressed with every single one that I've had hands-on experience with. And this one here, for 169 US dollars, has a great look to it, but also has tritium tubes. And trying to find a watch on AliExpress with tritium tubes that actually looks good is quite hard, especially at an affordable sort of price. You can get it on a metal strap, which looks a bit odd to me, and I've seen a few reviews of it already now, and people aren't overly impressed by that, so I'd definitely probably be getting on the canvas personally. I think it looks awesome. I think it has this really interesting case shape, and let me just try and show you that part of the case there. It almost scoops away from the dial. Now, I'm pretty sure this is very much a homage watch, so it's not an original design, but I'm okay with that, especially at this 169 US dollars. Let's jump down to the specifications of it to see actually how big this watch is, because I think it's a 39 millimeter, which is perfect in my opinion. 20 millimeter bandwidth, which is great. 100 meters of water resistance, and it says it's a mechanical wristwatch. I'm not 100% sure what mechanical movement is inside of this one. Let's have a look, see here. No, it doesn't really tell you. It says mechanical movement. So I'm going to assume that it's probably a seagull movement. At this price range, that's not too bad. But it'd be great if they really specified it, because it would make it a lot easier for us to make better buying decisions when we're looking at watches on AliExpress. Now, you probably weren't expecting me to show you a clown watch, were you? So this is going to be a little bit different. I'm not sure everybody's going to like this one, but for 198 US dollars, you get basically a moon phase clown watch. You look at the hours there, you look at the minutes there, and it's got a 24-hour dial, which is that sort of moon phase. Comes in a couple of different colors there, different variations. And I don't know, this just grabs my attention. I think it's going to be a fun looking watch, an interesting looking watch, something very different. And check out the lume. The eyes are actually lumed. And again, I don't think everybody's going to love this one, and I understand that, but I like pointing out some of these slightly different watches because it's nice to have something slightly different in your collection. It has a 42 millimeter case diameter, 50 meters of water resistance, and it's from a brand called Oblivio, which is a little bit different. Not really sure what is powering this one, but I think when it comes to fun watches, I think it's worth definitely having one in the collection. And this one, well, this one could be for you, because if you're interested in clown watches, because there is a very expensive clown watch out there on the market, which not many of us can afford. If you want a budget affordable variant of that, this might be the one for you. Now, recently I've been seeing quite a few watches come from a website called Watch Dives. They sell a whole heap of AliExpress watches and San Martin watches, but they have their own brand of watches as well. And this is probably one of the best ones I've found. And this one's been listed on AliExpress. It's a vintage sub-looking watch, but it's only 98 US dollars with a 41 millimeter case diameter and a Seiko NH35. And you've got a couple of different dial variants as well. You can have the numerals there, or have the more traditional style. And I think the more traditional style probably suits this one. But on that bracelet there, I think it actually looks really good. And this price range, and I've actually heard some good things about these Watch Dives watches. Let's jump down to the specifications quickly just to see what is being listed there. Talking about a 300 meter water resistance, 41 millimeter case diameter, automatic self-winding movement. Again, I wish they just mentioned exactly what it is inside of that watch, but I can certainly say at this price range, I think it looks quite good. Here we go, hang on a second. NH35, here we go. See, it's written somewhere. That's the movement that I'd really want in this movement or this watch. I guess the NH38, the no date variant, would be better, but I guess that's what they've put in this one. Now, for the only non-mechanical watch on the list today. Now, I do particularly like mechanical watches, which is why I gravitate towards them, which is why they end up on my watch list. But I have nothing against quartz, and I do like quartz watches that have something a little bit different about them, have some good value, and that really just draw my attention. And this one definitely drew my attention. It is the Miltaldo VD78. It has a quartz movement, as I mentioned, 99 US dollars, or about 100 US dollars. Has a great look to it. I love these applied numbers, these beautiful looking polished hands, and I love a sub-second registry. And there's a bunch of different options. This one is very, very reminiscent of a micro brand. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. And it's not exactly a brand new design, but I think at this price, I think it might be quite nice, but I don't think it's the biggest watch in the world. Let's jump down to the specifications of this one. Yeah, a Japanese movement inside of it. It is a 36 millimeter lug to lug of 43 millimeters. So not exactly the biggest watch out there, but for this sort of price, it might be quite a nice little dress watch to have in the collection, and it's certainly not going to break your budget. And speaking of slightly smaller watches, because this one is a 37 millimeter, this Chronos BB39, $179 US, featuring the Seiko NH35. Again, obviously by no means an original design. I don't think many watches on this list today are original designs, but I think it's a great looking watch. And it's funny because the watch that this is definitely homaging, for me, it's probably not my favorite from their catalog, the watches that they are copying here, or they're sort of mimicking or homaging, but I like them, but I like them at this price much more than the originals. So at this price, I think it's going to be quite good. 37 millimeters case diameter, 46 lug to lug, so it's going to fit virtually everybody's wrist size, and you can get it with a Sellita as well, or a PT5000, or the NH35. This one, or this particular listing's only got the NH35 for that $180 US. And I have to admit, I keep getting drawn towards these tank style watches, or these Art Deco style watches, or these sort of square cased watches. I'm often looking at some of the new versions of them. I'm often looking at the vintage versions of them, but I keep getting scared away a little bit because of the price sometimes, which is why I think if you can get a good one off AliExpress, maybe it might be worthwhile considering. And this one here is probably the best looking one that I have seen. I absolutely adore this sort of probably Art Deco-y style case. I like the sort of look of the dial with the sub-seconds. The price is, however, pushing my boundaries a fair amount, but I still wanted to show you this one, even though it is quite expensive, because of the looks of this one. I think it is a beautiful looking watch. There is a salmon dial variant as well, if it will actually show me that. Click on it. Go on, there you go. Look, salmon dial variant, featuring a Seagull ST 1 second small second hand movement, which at this price, that is pushing my boundaries. So I'm not really expecting you guys to be jumping on this one and buying this one, but I still wanted to bring it to your attention, because sometimes even if you're not going to buy a watch, it's still interesting to be aware of them. Let's move down to the specifications of this one a little bit. Yeah, Seagull movement, sapphire crystal, or the strap as you'd expect. Now here we go, case diameter is 31 with a lug to lug of 42, which sounds small, but for this sort of design of watch, you don't actually want them too big, otherwise they just end up being quite large. The dimensions don't really represent how the watch then sits on your wrist. And I thought I'd finish with another fun watch from AliExpress. I do tend to be sort of leaning towards these fun watches recently, and I don't expect people to have a whole collection of what I consider fun watches or interesting watches, but I have found it very, very important to have at least one in your collection. I've always now sort of kept one fun watch in my collection, and I think it's a really important watch to have in the collection, because it breaks up all these sort of more sort of standard and traditional watches that you have and gives you a bit of an outlet, even if it's just color, but design or perhaps functions. And I just find it really important. And I just wanted to show you this one because this one stood out to me as another possible fun one if you weren't interested in that clown watch I showed you before. This one here is the Pindu design for $148 US. And I think it's a great looking watch. It obviously has one of those modified movements, which is like a wandering hour or something like that. I've seen some videos on this one and I can see that's quite easy to tell the time, but there's actually some different variations of it as well, obviously working off that same movement. So there's some different variations of this style, not just straps, but actually complete different dials. And when you look at the loom shots of this one, I think that, let's go back to the loom. That looks cool. Look at that. Something very, very different. But jumping down to the specifications of this one to give you a bit of an understanding of what we've got going on. Strap diameter of 22 millimeters, a 42 millimeter case diameter, 50 meters of water resistance, and I don't think it actually mentions which movement is inside of this. This is a bit of an issue that continues to happen, but I know it's obviously a modified movement. I'm going to guess maybe a Miyota. I've seen a few variations of Miyota movements that can be pushed into this style, but I just think it's quite fun and interesting, and I just do find it very important to have a fun, interesting watch in the collection. I'm really interested to know what you've thought about these ones. I've deliberately sort of found some very wide variety of watches to share with you today, but every single one of them I have shared with you today really does interest me enough to possibly consider buying them myself. If you've ended up buying any of these ones, please let me know what you think. If you think some of these are terrible, let me know in the description as well. And if you don't want to see these watches and you possibly want to see some other watches that I have found in the past, maybe check out these videos.